page is coming from the database through CGI script, and therefore it looks different for different users. So this page is generated on the fly, right? Some part of the page is already there, it is fixed, but the rest of the part of the page is dynamically generated, right, from the CGI script. So therefore, when two users are accessing the same page, result.html, they will get two different content, right? Because this part is same, but the rows and columns of the table, these actually changes, and accordingly they will get two different results. So this is what we call the dynamic document, right? So this dynamic document is what is actually referred as the web application. Sometimes we called it as web application. So what is the difference between website and web application? So website is generally collection of the static documents, right, which is just informative, right? It is not user interactive. That is, the site content do not change according to the input provided by the user. So this is all static, right? It is just informative. So therefore we call them a website. Whereas a web application is normally consist of documents which are generated dynamically based on the user request, right? So these are called the web applications, right? So that is how the dynamic document are generated and they are consumed. The third type of documents, so sometimes these dynamic documents are also referred as server-side scripting, because this script here, the CGI script, the script means a small program. So I'm just using a word script here because it is very commonly used in web application. But when I say script, what do I mean by script? A script is nothing but it is a small program which is written in some programming language, maybe Perl, maybe Python, maybe C, or maybe something else, maybe Java or something, right? So it is just a small piece of program which is executed to generate the HTML document dynamically, right? So that is what we called a script. Okay, so this since this particular script is running on the server side, sometimes the dynamic documents are also referred as the server side scripting, right? So or server side dynamic documents, right? So server side scripting means the script is executed, you make a request, and then the server actually executes a script on the server side, generate the HTML page, and then the deliver HTML page to the client. However, there is also another kind of scripting also, right, where the page, the HTML page is dynamically modified and generated, right, based on certain script, again based on certain program. But these scripts are not executed on the server side. Rather, these scripts are actually downloaded from the server machine to the client machine, and then they are executed inside the client software itself. So what is the client software that we are using in? We are using the web browser, right? So web browser is actually capable of executing these scripts, right? So as you can see here that we look at the structure of the web browser. So the structure of the web browser actually consists of this part. The first part is HTML, where it can interpret the HTML content and display the HTML content on the screen. The second component of the web browser is JavaScript compiler or JavaScript interpreter. So JavaScript interpreter is something, it's kind of a compiler that is able to understand the JavaScript code, and not only understand, it is able to execute the JavaScript code, and based on the JavaScript code it is able to change the property of the client window, or that is the property of the browser window. So you can minimize, you can maximize, you can capture a click event, you can capture a select event, you can capture the mouse hover event. So all these kind of events can be captured, can be you can write some program based on that. You can write, okay, if I take cursor here, then this text should become bold, or if I click on this figure, it should take me to another page or something like that, right? So I mean, so this is the JavaScript interpreter which actually executes the JavaScript programs on the browser, and not only executes it, but it also kind of changes the behavior of the client window, right, based on the program outcome, right? So you can actually make some decisions, and based on that you can actually capture certain events, and based on that you can modify the behavior of the client window, right? Similarly, the browser will also contain another interpreter that is called the Java runtime environment, or JVM, or Java interpreter. So obviously for this Java interpreter to work, you have to first of all install Java virtual machine on your or JVM, which should be installed on your machine. But if you have it, then using the Java virtual machine you have a Java interpreter, and that is also possible, or that is also able to execute Java programs inside the web browser. So you actually have a Java program which is running inside the web browser, and then it is actually modifying the content of the browser window based on this program here. So in fact, the beginning of this client side, so this is called client side scripting. Why this is called client side scripting? Because the script is executed, and the client window is changed according to the script output, but this script is not executed on the server side. Rather, the script is executed on the client side. So therefore, this is called client side scripting. And this kind of document which contains this kind of client side scripting, these are sometimes called the active document. Why it is called an active document? Because the document itself contains the source code. So you make a request, so there is a document, the document itself contains the source code also, right? Then as a part of the response, the document is loaded, the HTML document is loaded on the client side, along with the source code is also loaded on the client side. So you are loading two things here. You are loading the HTML page, as well as you are also loading the source code of your program, or the source code for which you want to execute on the client side. That source code is also loaded from the server to the client, and then the client browser see that, okay, this is not only the HTML page, but it is also the source code, and a part of the HTML page is generated by the source code. So it will execute the source code on the browser interpreter, and then based on the outcome of that execution, or based on the outcome of that script, it will modify the HTML document on the client side itself, right? Document is not generated or not modified on the server side. The document is modified after the document is loaded on the client, after the document is loaded on the client side, and the source code of the script is loaded on the client side. The source code script is executed, and based on the outcome of the script, the HTML document is modified on the client side itself, right? So that is how the active documents, or you can say the client side scripting is working. So in fact, the first kind of client side scripting came into existence with Java. So we called it as Java applets, right? So Java applets were the first kind of scripting language which were introduced, and which were used to modify the client side documents. The problem with the Java applet was that the Java applet was dependent on the other third-party software that is called JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So you have to install browser, as well as you also have to install the JVM. Then you will be able to execute Java applets on the client side. But then the browser community, that is the companies which were building browsers, prominently the Google Chrome, right, and some other open source initiative like Firefox and Netscape, they said that we don't have to have a dependency on the external programming language. Let us create an interpreter which is embedded inside the browser itself, right? So they come up with a new kind of programming language and a new kind of interpreter, which we call JavaScript. So JavaScript is a programming language, right? Remember, there is nothing common in Java and JavaScript except the name Java. And why the name Java is there? Because of this legacy, because the first kind of client side scripting was Java applets. So now they want to say that, okay, this is similar to Java applet, so therefore they copy the name Java here, and they generated something called JavaScripts. But the difference between these two is that the JavaScript is fully integrated inside the browser, and you do not require any other external dependency. Unlike Java applets, where you require an external dependency, you require to install the Java virtual machine, then and then this will work. In this case, it is fully integrated inside the client browser, and therefore the browser does not require any other external agency in order to run and execute this particular program. So this particular scripting is called JavaScript. Remember, the JavaScript is a programming language, but its structure and its syntax is very different than Java. It has nothing common with Java, except the name JavaScript there. Otherwise they are totally two different programming languages and two different programming paradigms, right? So that is what it is. So that is how the client side scripting using JavaScript came into existence, right? So client side scripting, what is happening? Again, I am repeating. You make a request here, HTML document contains the HTML part, as well as it also contains the source code, right, the script code, and then along with the HTML document, the script code is also loaded onto the client side. So the client browser detects that, okay, there is a script code here, so it executes the script on the JavaScript interpreter, right, and then it generates the output, and based on the output, the HTML document is modified on the client side itself. The document is not modified on the server side. Remember, it is modified on the client side itself. Therefore, it is sometimes called the client side scripting, or these kind of documents are sometimes called the active document, right? So that is what you mean by JavaScript, right? Or the client side document. Okay, so let us now try to, so I think you understood what you mean by web server. We understood what you mean by website. We understood what you mean by the URL, the uniform resource locator. We understood what kind of documents, web documents are being served, right? What is the structure of the client software browser? What is the structure of the server software, that is HTTP server? And we understood the different kind of document being served by HTTP, that is the dynamic document, the static document, and the active document, right? Now let us try to dive deep into the HTTP protocol itself. What is the structure of the HTTP protocol? What kind of messages are exchanged in the HTTP protocol? Because HTTP anyway is a network protocol, so, and it is working in a client server mode. So there is an HTTP client, which is browser, and there is an HTTP server, which is your web server. And there is a communication going on between HTTP client and HTTP server. So how this communication is happening? What is the structure of the message format? Let us try to look all this, right? So HTTP uses the service of TCP, right? So HTTP is implemented using a TCP protocol. Why it is a TCP protocol? Because the web request that you are making sometimes could be very lengthy, because you will also be passing certain parameters. You will be uploading files. So size of the HTTP request can be very, very bigger, like it can be more than 512 bytes. Okay, when you are uploading a when you are uploading an image, or maybe when you are uploading a video file, the size of the request could be very large, right? So therefore, since the size of the document is very large, therefore the UDP protocol is not suitable. You sometimes need to divide your data or your request into multiple requests, right? Suppose you are trying to upload a video of 1 MB or 2 MB or 5 MB, then 5 MB of video cannot be uploaded at the same time. You have to divide it into chunks, and then you need to upload it. So because of all these reasons, we required the protocol to be used has to be a connection oriented protocol, right? That is, you establish a connection, and then you divide data into chunks, and then you maintain the flow, that what data is already transmitted and what data is yet to be transmitted, right? So for that, you required sequence number, and you required acknowledgement number, and you have to make sure that all the data is transmitted onto the server in a correct format, in a correct order, right? So therefore, the HTTP protocol basically uses a TCP protocol, and it is running on a well-known port number called 80, right? But however, it is not the case that you always run HTTP on 80, right? You can, so this I'm talking about HTTP server, right? HTTP server is always running on 80. HTTP client can be running on any random port number, right? So we already know that the client software do not have any well-defined port numbers, right? The clients actually start using the random port numbers and dynamic port numbers, and then when the dynamic port number goes to the server along with the request, then the server can communicate with the client by using the source port number as a destination, right? So that is how it works. So that is what we already seen. So the HTTP server uses a well-known port number 80, but however, this is not a compulsion. You can run the HTTP protocol on different port number, but if you do that, then you have to mention explicitly in your URL that which port number you are using in order to run this particular HTTP server. Okay, so that is what it is. Now, as far as the messages are concerned, HTTP is a stateless protocol. What do you mean by stateless protocol? That HTTP protocol is divided into request and response. So you make a request for a web document, and the server is responsible for giving back that particular web document here, right? When you make a second request for the second web document to the server, then in that case, the server do not remember that whether you have made any previous request or not, right? That is, it does not maintain the state of the request that the client is being sending to the server. So that is why it is called a stateless protocol. So every request that the server receives from a client is independent of the previous request, or it is independent of the any other request that is made by the client, the same client in past, right? So it does not track, right? कि उसको पता नहीं है कि ये client ने मेरे को already एक page किया है, तो now this is a second page which I am doing in. It doesn't know it, right? It doesn't remember all these things. So therefore, it is a responsibility of the developer to maintain the state explicitly, right? तो कोई state information जो है वो वहाँ पे maintain नहीं होती है. तो आप बोलोगे कि सर तो फिर कैसे पता चलता है? Suppose the first page is the login page, right? So if I try to access my Gmail account, you see that when I access a Gmail account, the first page is a login page. And when I enter the username and password, then it goes on to the next page. And when it goes into the next page, how does it remember? that okay, it was Mukesh Goswami who logged in, and therefore I should be showing the information related to Mukesh Goswami only. How it is remembering? If you say that they are stateless, how you are remembering? We are remembering this because we are maintaining this state explicitly inside the web application itself. So that is called the session management. That is called the HTTP session management. So that is the job of the developer, the application developer, to actually maintain session explicitly. But HTTP protocol itself do not maintain any status or do not track any request. For HTTP server, every request is a new request. Every request is independent of the previous request made by the same client or previous request made by the other clients, right? So it doesn't maintain any state. As a programmer, as a developer, we have to maintain that session, right? Ki acha, पिछले कौन login किया था, who is the username and password. So as a web application developer, we have to maintain this session here, right? Not the HTTP server itself. HTTP server do not maintain any status. It is simply stateless protocol. So what is the part of the HTTP request and HTTP response? So HTTP request actually has a request line, then it has HTTP header, then it has a blank line, and then it has the body of the HTTP request, right? So this is actually the text document, right? This is the HTTP text document which we are sending to the client. क्या क्या है इसके अंदर? The text document का the text document is actually divided line by line. So the first line in the text is the request line. The next few lines are called header, and then there is a blank line, and then we have the body of this HTTP request message. And then similarly on the response part, you have the status line is the first line of the response. Then you have some header part, right? Then you have a blank line, and after the blank line you have the body of contains response. For example, this body could contain the entire HTML, right? The body could contain the entire HTML document which you are serving to the client, right? क्योंकि वो document itself is a text document, we are serving this particular document as a client, right? To the client in terms of the text, right? So this is the entire body actually consists of the entire HTML document in case of response. Okay, so let us try to see what is the line you have, right? So the request line actually consists of request type, right? There are multiple types you can have for request. Let's say get request, post request, put request, delete request. Get request means when you are getting something for first time, you are requesting a page, that is called get request. Post request means that you are sending some data to the server, and the server is supposed to respond to that data. For example, you are first of all you are accessing a website, so website will execute a get request to get the login page. Now once you enter the username and password and then you press submit button, now this time you are actually accessing the same page again, the login page again, but this time you are passing additional information. You are passing the username and password information to the page, and therefore the page will respond accordingly, right? So therefore you have to pass some additional information, that is called the post request. You are posting something, you are sending something to the server, you are sending some data to the server, that is called the post request. And then you have put request. Put request means when you are uploading something, say for example an image or a video which you are uploading on the server, you have to send the put request and so on. So there are various types of request type. So you have to mention first of all that which kind of request it is. Is it a simple get request where you are getting a web page? Is it a post request where you are trying to send some data to that particular web server? Or is it a put request, or is it a delete request or something? Then comes a URL. URL means the exact URL that you try to address or you try to access. So this URL is actually the URL of the page that you are looking in, and not the server itself, right? So the server part is removed here. This only consists the information of the page, right, that you are trying to access. And then you have the HTTP protocol version. So there are various versions of the protocol. So which version of the protocol you are using here, that you have to mention explicitly. The which version is used by the client. It may be possible that the HTTP server is using a different version of HTTP and the client is working with a different version of HTTP, right? So this has to be common, right, on both the sides. Then the client would be able to interpret the content which is sent by the server. So therefore HTTP version, the client is explicitly telling the server that okay, I am using this HTTP version, so therefore kindly formulate the response as per this version and send it back to me, right? So this is what you are explicitly telling the server, that which version of HTTP you are using. Now, so this is the request line which is sent from client to server. Now let's see what server has to send back to the client, right? So the server will send back to the client the HTTP version. So this HTTP version here and HTTP version here, this both should match, right? This both should match. Then and then it is possible for you to interpret or see this content appropriately, right? So server will check what is the HTTP version, and based on the HTTP version, it will generate the response, and it will tell the client that okay, I am generating a response as per this HTTP version. And then the status code indicates whether the request was successful or the request was not successful, whether the document that you are looking in exists on the server or not, or the document does not exist, or maybe something else, right? Or the information that you provided is incorrect. So there are so many different status code which are there. So this status code is written here, and then the status code is also associated with the status phrase. For example, the status code 200, HTTP status code 200 corresponds to OK. OK means everything is good and the server is able to respond to the request appropriately, right? Then that is called HTTP 200. The other very commonly used status code is HTTP 404. 404 means page not found, right? So you are trying to access a web page, but the web server is not able to find that page on the web server. Web server is not able to locate that page on the website. So a web server will respond with 404 and saying that page not found, or the content not found, or document not found. So once you see the status code, you should immediately, the client immediately understood that the web page I'm trying to locate in is not available, right? So that is what the status is. So these are some of the methods we have. Get method, head method. So get method request a document. Head method only requests the header of the document and not the document itself. See, sometimes you only need to load the header part, right, and not the entire document, right? Because entire document could be consist of a lot, or it could be consist of a lot of information. You do not require all the information. You only require the information about the page, like what that page is and what it contains. So you only request the header part of it. So that is called the head request. Then you have post request when you are sending some data back to the server. Put request when you are uploading a document. Trace request when it's an echo request for an incoming thing, right? So you send a trace request and the server will simply respond it back. It's just like a ping, right? It is an echo request. Nothing, it's not serving anything. It doesn't give you any HTML, but it simply checks whether the web server is connected or not, and it's like that, right? So but this connect and this is reserved option is also reserved. These are not very widely used here. The most widely used techniques are get, head, post, and there is something called delete also, which is not mentioned here, which you can use it to delete content, right? So these are the different kind of method that you can use it in the status line, right? So this is the request type. So you can have a request type equal to get, request type equal to head, request type equal to post, request type equal to put. Now the next is a status code, right? So status code 100 means continuing. The initial part of the request is received and we are requesting, we are waiting for more part to come in. 101 means switching. The server is copying the client request to switch protocol, right? And then the most widely used is status 200, which is referred as OK. The request is successfully solved. 201 means created, a new URL is created. 202 is accepted, means the request is accepted, but it is not immediately acted upon. So if the server is busy, sometimes it is not able to solve you. It will get an HTTP request. Server will identify it that they received the request, but they are not able to solve the content right now. So therefore, what it returns is it returns 202, server busy, right? So these are the status code that you will see, right? And there are status code like 400 bad request. The syntax is not valid, right? 401, it is unauthorized access. 403, 404 is not found. This is very common again. 404 not found means the document that you are looking in is not found, right? So these are the some of the widely used status code, and there are status phrases, right? So this status codes and status phrases are embedded inside the response that is generated by server to the client. Okay, so all the header. Now the next section, so first is the status line. So once the status line is generated, the next part is the header part, right? Request header and response header. So header actually has a key value pair. There are number of parameters that we are passing in the header. All the parameters are passed as a key value pair. So name of the parameter, the header parameter name, colon, the value of the parameter, right? So we have the name of the parameter, colon, the value of the parameter, and there is one space in between, right? So you have a name of the parameter, colon, and there is a space, one space, and after the space we have the value of the header. So what are the different header parameters? You can have cache control, yes or no, connection, yes or no, what is the current date, what is a MIME type. MIME type indicates that what kind of documents or what kind of contents are supported by this web document. I said that the HTML is able to support images, HTML is able to support video, HTML is able to support text, and there are many different kinds of content that the HTML is able to support, like JSON or XML or something like that. But again, see, the kind of HTML protocol, that version that you use on the client would be different than the HTML version that is being served by the server. So therefore, sometimes you have to specify that, okay, what kind of contents are actually supported by your browser, and the server will only send those kind of content which are supported by the browser, right? So this MIME type or MIME version indicates that what kind of multimedia content are supported by your browser, right? So then you have authorization. Authorization indicates the content or the information which is needed to access resource which is, you know, which is not open to public, right? So it is a private resource and can only be accessed if you have some authorization information, for example a token, right? So authorization is very important parameter when we talk about REST APIs, because the REST APIs can only be accessed by authenticated users. So you have to get a token, and once you have a token, then and then you will be able to access that web page, otherwise you will not be able to access that content. So therefore the authorization parameter actually consists of the authorization information, right, and up to etc, so on, right? So these are some of the tags that we have in the request header. Similarly, in the response header also we have accepted range, age, public, shows the supported list of methods, right? Server name and version of the server, it is shown here. Then you have the content encoding, what is the encoding used, what is the length of the content, what is the range, what is the type of the content, whether the content is image or text or JSON or something else, right? The type of the content is indicated here. So this is how it is generated. So this is a very simple example of an HTTP request and HTTP response. So HTTP request says that it is /user/bin image1. So you remember that this is a relative path. This is the path of the uniform resource locator, but I didn't mention the prefix of this path. What is the prefix? The prefix is the name of the server, right? So http:// and then www.xyz.com. This is the prefix, right? Where the prefix indicate the protocol name and prefix indicate the name of the server to which we are trying to connect. So this prefix part is omitted, right? So HTTP request actually consists of the suffix, that is the relative path of the content itself and not the server and the protocol, right? So you say get /user/bin/image1. So you are asking the server to give you this content. What is image? What is the content? The content is image1. And where this image1 is located? The image1 is located in this folder /user/bin on the server, right? Normally you are not able to access /user/bin because it is under root, right? Normally you are able to access only some folder. Normally we only make certain folders public. So web server is able to serve content only from certain folders. So these folders are sometimes called www root folder, www root folder, right? So the server is only able to access the folder www root, right? It is not able to access any other folder, right? But just for the sake of example, right now we are saying that we are able to access all the folder, let's say. So therefore you are requesting a file called image1. This image1 file is there inside /user/bin directory, which is there on the server. You are using the HTTP protocol 1.1. So this is the type of request, this is the URL, and this is the version number. And then what you are saying that I am ready to accept GIF and I am ready to accept JPG, right? So what you are saying to the server that I am able to receive these kind of images. I'm able to interpret GIF image and I'm able to interpret JPEG image. So do not send any other format. You cannot send a BMP file or you cannot send something else, right? So we request or we accept or we are able to process only these kind of images, GIF images and JPEG images, right? So that is what we are telling the server. Now server will in turn send the response. What does the server will do? So this is the response line. What is the response line? HTTP/1.1. So this is the HTTP version number. Then the status code okay. Why it is okay? Because the server was able to locate this file and server was able to serve this file. So therefore the status is equal to 200. That is okay, right? And then date at which the response was sended, server challenge, and then MIME version, right? Content type version here. Content length, what is the length of this file? So we say that it is 2048 bytes, so that is approximately 2 MB. So size of this image is approximately 2 MB, and then the image itself is encoded, or it is written here in the body of the document, right? So the document body actually contains this image itself. So this is how the entire image is given back to the client. So this goes to the web browser. So web browser will see that, oh, this is image. It will convert this document or this byte information into image, and it will display the image inside the browser window, right? So this is basically you are sending image in terms of a sequence of bytes, right? So it will interpret, or it will convert that sequence of byte into image version, into image back, and then it will display that in the browser window. So that is how the entire request and response mechanism works in. Okay, so this is another example where we are talking about a CGI script, right? So I'm trying to access doc.pl. PL means it's a Perl. So I'm saying that I'm trying to access a script or a document which is generated by a Perl language, right? So instead of PL, you might have PHP, right? You can say doc.php. That is, you are trying to access the script which is written in PHP, or you may say doc.jsp. JSP means what? It is Java server pages. So JSP is a script developed by Java community or Java programming language, right? So that is again a CGI script, right? But written in Java. So you can access it by JSP, or you can access it by ASP, right? So there are multiple documents here: doc.pl, doc.asp, doc.php, right? So here we are assuming that we have a CGI script which is written in Perl, which is responsible for generating this document, right? So we are accessing this /CGI/bin doc.pl, right? Now what this will do, it will execute the script here. When the request goes on to the server will execute the script doc.pl, generate the HTTP response, and that HTTP response is actually handed back here. But you see that inside this post method, the content length is equal to 50. What is the content length means 50? That there are some content. For example, this doc.pl is a script that is accepting the username and password, and then based on the username and password, it is giving you the home page, right? Or it is giving you the result page, right? So it is, so for example, this is, you are requesting the result document, and the result document is generated based on your ID number and your name. So what is the input? The input is ID number and name. So along with the request, you also need to pass that additional information, that this is the ID number, this is the name, and then the request goes to the server. Server will extract this ID number and name, and it will execute doc.pl script, pass this information as an input to that script. The script will generate a document, and that document is returned back to the client. So that is why, since we are passing additional information here, so that is why the request type, instead of get, the request type changes to post. Why it is post? Because I am posting some information. I am posting some additional information that will help the server to generate the document. So normally the post method is used when we have dynamic documents. For static documents, you need not require post, because static documents are anyway static. You do not require any additional information to access the static page. So majority of the static documents are served using GET request. Majority of the dynamic document which required some additional information are served using post request. So the request type is post. This is the name of URL, type of version, HTTP version, and then what you accept image, you accept star means you accept any content, right? Your browser is capable of handling any kind of content here, and like that. And then the HTTP response for that is version 1.1, 200 OK. 200 OK indicates that yes, I am able to find the script, I'm able to execute the script successfully, and I'm able to generate the document successfully. So therefore it is 200 OK. And then we have the content length 2000, that is the document generated based on the information you provided. So this is the length of the document. And document type here can also be mentioned, that okay, the response is HTML, or the response is text, or the response is JSON, or the response is image, right? So that is not mentioned here, but it could also be mentioned by the server, that what is the kind of document that you are responding back. And then the actual document or the actual content goes into the body of the response, right? So that is how the HTTP request and HTTP response mechanism is working in. So I hope this makes sense, and you are able to understand the HTTP protocol, the mechanism of HTTP request and response, and likewise, right? So with this, I take up a little pause here, and I'm just opening a floor for any question related to HTTP protocol. Again, my objective is not to make you an expert. You need to go through HTTP protocol. I will be covering that again in detail when we'll be talking about web application development using J2EE and web application development using .NET, maybe in the higher semester, 6 semesters and 7 semester. But it is good that it is must that you have this basic knowledge of how HTTP is working. What do you mean by website? What do you mean by web server? What do you mean by dynamic document? What do you mean by static document? What do you mean by active document? What do you mean by URL? What is the structure of the URL? Why we are writing HTTP there? Why not we are writing something else? Your browser can also serve FTP, right? So if suppose you are trying to access an FTP content through your web browser, instead of HTTP, you should have been written FTP, right? So आपको क्या लिखना पड़ेगा वहां पे? You have to change the name of the protocol. Browser के अंदर ही you have to write it like this. Okay, so you have to write FTP : and then name of the server 192.168.1.1/ something. So you can type this in the browser also. So your browser is also capable of serving FTP as an FTP client as well. So browser is not only HTTP client, the browser can also serve as an FTP client also, right? So if you want to change the protocol, right, instead of FTP you want to use HTTP, then in the URL you should mention the name of the protocol as FTP : and then something, and then you need to mention port number if it is running on a different port. If you do not mention port number, it will assume that the FTP is running on a standard port number, that is port number 26, right? So that is what it is. So I think you should have a fair enough idea now that what is the web browser, web server, website, web documents, what is HTML, what is HTTP request, HTTP response, and how things are working. So if you have any doubt related to this, you can raise your questions, raise your doubts, or else we'll be moving to our next topic. Any questions related to HTTP protocol? Again, let me repeat, this is a very important protocol, not only from exam point of view, but in general, because this is something that you are dealing with throughout your life. Hello, is anybody there? Or I am the only one? Yeah, thank you. At least few guys are there. Don't know about others. Okay, so with this, we'll wrap up our discussion on HTTP. Now there are two more application layer protocols called FTP and Telnet, probably, or SMTP. So probably Deepak sir will talk about those protocols in the sessions that he's going to take maybe today or tomorrow. What I will do rather is